but just have a chance to have everybody jump in and tell us where they're coming from. Welcome, Virginia, Ohio. I see a Canadian contingent. Welcome. Welcome, Hawaii.
Aloha.
Mississippi, down the road from me. Boy, coming in fast, y'all. We had, I think, about 1,500 of y'all registered today. Thank you for your continued support of joining us here on the Tree Fund webinar series. As you join us, let us know where you're coming from. Find that chat function. It's always good to see all these places around the globe pop up. I saw Hong Kong a second ago. Welcome. I'm always impressed with y'all that join us at awkward times of the day. I think it's great. Welcome, Mobile. Well, that's just across the bay from me. Well, y'all, my clock reads 12 noon Central. I know that's various time zones around the country and around the world. So I'd like to go ahead and get us started. Welcome to the Tree Fund webinar series, to this edition that we're having on this beautiful day in May. My name is Bo Broadbeck. I work with Auburn University and have the opportunity to be one of the hosts and moderators of the Tree Fund webinar series. We got a few faces with us here today. We got a Tree Fund board member that's going to be talking a little bit about Tree Fund. We've got our two speakers. And of course, we have my partner in crime and co-host to the Tree Fund webinar series, Heath Hubke with Tree Fund, that's going to give us a little bit of a welcome and update. I'll turn the floor over to you, Heath.
Thank you, Bo. And thank you all for attending today. We're excited. We're really in the mix of our webinar series. And so thank you so much for attending today. And thank you to our sponsors. As a nonprofit or a non-government organization, we really rely on our support from many of our partners and individuals. And after last webinar, we also had a lot of you donate and support Tree Fund and our mission here. And so thank you so much for that support and for continually making opportunities for us to get this information to you for free. We're happy and proud through our partners, our sponsors, and our donors to make sure that these opportunities, our Tree Fund webinar series, continues to be free. And it is something that we've been able to celebrate 10-year anniversary this year of the webinar series. Much before we thought about Zoom and all of the various teleconferencing opportunities that we had, we've been bringing this to you. But as you can see, we have over 800 people right now attending. So this is an amazing opportunity that our sponsors and donors and our researchers and everything that Tree Fund is able to do to bring these great opportunities to the comfort of your home or your workplace and make this free education opportunities. So if you would like to continue, find a way to support us, whether it's $10 or much more, every dollar helps support these programs, the research that we use in our fields, and to help the tomorrows of our community. So feel free to spend some time now, soon, later, getting on truefund.org and considering a donation to help our mission. That is, I hope you all find so greatly useful. Now, some of the nuts and bolts of today. When you registered for today's webinar, your name and certification number with ISA was already recorded. You do not need to put that in the chat. We already have all of that information. If you get logged out somehow, just log back in and that information is saved, and you will still get your CEUs. No need to send an email or put in the chat your ISA information. Both March and April webinars should also already be on your ISA portal. So if you haven't found those, please do send an email to education@treefund.org and let me know. If at the end of this, if you attended the whole time and you would like a certificate of attendance, also please email education@treefund.org and that will get to you probably within the next 2 weeks. Again, we've got now over 900 people attending. So it's a lot of work to organize all that information and get it out in a timely fashion. And wanted to also just let us know, we do have some upcoming webinars. Right now, we've just got one registration open, but you can still save all of these dates. We've got Tuesday, July 22nd, leveraging data and experience for tree equity panel discussion. That registration link will be up soon and shortly, so please be on the lookout soon. Otherwise, we've got October, November, and December webinars coming up. So feel free, make sure that you're getting our emails, that you're checking our webinar page and getting registered as soon as possible. And next, I'm proud to introduce Andrew Kozer. He is an associate professor of the urban tree and landscape management at University of Florida's Gulf Coast Research and Education Center. His work bridges applied research and outreach with a focus on tree risk assessment, urban forest resilience, tree species diversity, and policy. He's a past recipient of the L.C. Chadwick Award and past president of the Florida chapter of ISA and current Board of Trustee member at Tree Fund. Andrew is deeply involved in advancing best practices across the arboriculture profession and has authored over 100 peer-reviewed articles, led numerous funded research projects, and mentors graduate students working in the intersection of science, policy, and practice. So Andrew, thank you so much for helping with us today and introducing.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. Welcome everyone to this webinar series, which has continued to be a success for a decade now. That's so impressive. You know, my history of the tree funds, the reason I want to serve on the board and why I donate my time and my money to the organization is it was there for me from the very start of my career. 20 years ago, as an intern at ISA headquarters in Champaign, I was like right next door to the Tree Fund's office at the time, which was one room. And it was my first grant, which got me launched in the career that I have today. So I owe a lot to the organization, and they are the most dependable source of funding for this kind of research that we have. And we've seen that play out in the last couple of months. So please, 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 contribute if you can. We have the virtual tour coming up. I'm going to be doing that myself. I did a one and done tour in Wisconsin. It's a tremendous opportunity to like explore a fitness goal and help out the organization. And I encourage everyone to either do it yourself or support someone in your chapter who's working towards that challenge. So, Bo, you've done many of them, I know. So, and with that, let's get to our talks. So we have two speakers who I'm well acquainted with today. We have Dr. Mysha Clarke and Dr. Stephanie Cadaval. Mysha and I have worked on a number of projects, and Stephanie, I was on her graduate committee. Dr. Cadaval, or Stephanie, right now she serves as our university down here in Florida extension coordinator for urban forestry. She's the glue that holds all of the many agents in the state together who work on urban forest issues and arboricultural issues. And she's doing a tremendous job using her skills as a top-notch social scientist, which you'll see today, to get us working together and finding out what the common goals and solutions are for our state. With that, we have with her is Dr. Mysha Clarke, who's another top-notch social scientist in the School of Forestry here. And she's worked on many things from the human dimensions of invasive plant management to what we see here today, which is, more aggressive disturbances with hurricanes and storms. So with that, I will lend the floor to them, and I look forward to seeing what they have to say today.
Great, thanks so much, Andrew. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, hopefully you're all seeing my title page. Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Cadaval, and I'm really happy to share with you some insights that we have from our research on managing urban trees for storm events. It feels especially timely to be doing this presentation now because we're in our pre-hurricane season here in Florida. So I'm really excited to be talking to all of you around the world. So first I want to introduce myself. As mentioned by Andrew, I'm the Urban Forest Extension Coordinator here at the University of Florida. And I work out of the School of Forest, Fisheries, and Geometric Sciences, and I'm based in Gainesville. Originally, I am from Miami, Florida, so the southern end of Florida. And currently, my work focuses on building those statewide collaborations in extension and working to support urban forestry outreach, research, and education. And this last summer, I completed my PhD in forest resources and conservation. And I looked into the human dimensions of how urban trees were managed for storm events. And I'm really excited to be sharing about that today with you all and with the Tree Fund community. So before we jump in, I really want to acknowledge the funders of this work, my university, and my co-authors and collaborators. So definitely the Tree Fund, the University of Florida, and my co-authors who are Dr. Lara Roman, Dr. Andrew Kozer, Dr. Tenley Conway, Dr. Theo Eisenman, and of course, Dr. Mysha Clarke, who's with us here today also. But again, especially I want to thank and acknowledge the Tree Fund that supported this work through that Bob Skiera Memorial Fund Building Bridges Initiative Grant Program. So today I'm going to talk about perceptions, I'm going to talk about collaborations, and I'm going to talk about those urban forest professionals that work managing trees for storm events, and how all these perceptions and collaborations impact the way that we manage trees. So to do that, I'm going to frame our understanding of urban forests and some of the ways that they're affected by storms. And I'm going to share some key insights and results from two phases of the research that we did. A key aspect of what we analyze in the study is perceptions. And perceptions are how we organize and interpret information. They shape our behavior and understanding. And our research contributes to some more understanding about how these perceptions guide management processes, how they shape collaborations, and how they inform risk or assessments of risk when folks are working with trees and storms. So for our work, we used a mixed methods approach, meaning that we incorporated both qualitative and quantitative data collection and analysis. And the first phase that I'm going to share with you all assesses professionals' perceptions and experiences about the process of managing trees for storms. And for this phase of the project, we interviewed 17 professionals in 3 case study cities in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Jacksonville, Florida, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And the second, it's the second phase, but the second phase is kind of split into 2 parts. But that second phase, we did a national assessment with 35 different states across the northern and southern US. And we focus on assessing professional assessments about collaboration in managing urban trees and their perceptions about risk and how this is related to their motivations to collaborate in management. And we've already published a paper from the first phase, and we're working currently on publishing the second phase of this project. So just a quick overview to get us all on the same page. We know that storm events can be very economically costly to cities, and every year the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration here in the US tracks all the billion-dollar weather events that we experience here in the US. And I like to show this map because it really shows the diversity of different storm types that communities might encounter year-round and can have impacts on urban forests. Things like population density and the particular conditions of the urban environment can make cities really sensitive to storm events. And we see on this map, there's different kinds of storms like hurricanes, tornadoes, derechos or windstorms, flooding, hail, severe thunderstorms. Many of our cities in the US are also impacted by snow and ice storms. So there really is a wide range and diversity of impacts that we can experience. So how do storms impact cities? Well, when storms happen, their impacts can be quite variable. Storm frequency and intensity can be really unpredictable, and we do know they can be financially costly. But it's important to note that it can also impact different parts of our urban spaces differently. Things like accumulated tree debris, damage to already aging tree canopies, damage to infrastructure, people, and property. All these things could be impacted not just in the moment of the storm, but also for months to years after storms pass through. We also know from other research that storm events can influence public perceptions about trees and the risks that are associated with them. And they can shape the way that the public decides whether or not to retain or remove trees from the landscape. And when it comes to collaboration in urban forestry, we generally see a lot of research that supports collaborative practices in urban forestry. We know that it plays a key role in governance. It's a way to overcome challenges with limited resources. It includes power sharing to define problems and solutions. And it comes from sharing goals. It necessitates the development of trust. And it can really help to expand stewardship and engagement with urban forestry. And we also did a literature review about conflict and collaboration in urban forestry that really informed a lot of what we learned about collaboration for this project. Okay, so now I want to go ahead and talk about that first phase. So this first phase of the project focused on 3 case study cities. So we looked at Philadelphia, Minneapolis, and Jacksonville. And this first phase of the project really helped us understand what urban tree management for storms look like, how urban forest professionals that were working in cities viewed the storm impacts, and how they prepared, responded, and to an extent, how their cities recovered from storms, how they assessed storm-related tree risk, how they selected trees for storms, and how they perceived community vulnerability and interacted with some of the other urban forest professionals working to manage trees. So again, to answer our research questions, we looked at 3 case study cities, and we chose these cities based on population size, urban forestry programs that were available there, their experience with hazardous weather, and we conducted semi-structured interviews via Zoom. And we did this from 2000 to 2001. So we spoke with 17 urban forest professionals, and our interviewees worked in multiple different roles, but they were working primarily in these categories. So we had utility managers, municipal and urban forest managers, emergency managers, and we also spoke with folks that worked in nonprofit, volunteer, or tree advocacy groups. And so now I want to share a little bit about our results. Overall, all of our participants worked in leadership, supervisory, or manager roles. They included people with a really wide range of experiences working with storms and trees, from about 2 years to about 40 years of experience. And the landscapes that they worked in included mainly street trees and right-of-ways, public parks and other public areas, residential areas, institutional areas, or forest patches and fragments. And when we began our interviews, we started by asking people about what made storms severe or impactful. And what we found was that participants seemed to categorize storms as impactful when these storms had intense damage potential or when they believed that they faced particular management challenges like limited resources. So we categorize this as 2 things: management challenges and storm characteristics. And when it came to management challenges, this could have meant that their staff was impacted or their ability to respond was impacted because of a limited staff. They may have felt that they had limited funding, or they may have had access to limited equipment or tools or other resources that they needed. And I have this quote here that I think really kind of illustrates the way that storms impacted ability to respond. So this person said, well, we have less than 30 staff who do in-house cleanup work. We have 10 staff in our street tree division, and that's where the inspectors are. So whenever there's storm-related or emergency-related work, those inspectors have to stop their regular work and go out and do the emergency inspection so they can direct that work. And then if there is emergency-related cleanup, again, our crews have to stop their regular workflow and go do that. And then when it came to standards of risk, we really see a mixed approach to how the different people that we spoke with in these different case study cities approach risk assessment. There were differences in how it was assessed among the different cases. For example, participants described relying on standardized definitions of risk based on things like professional education, something like TRAC or tree risk assessment qualifications. Others mentioned that it was more subjective and it was based on individual assessments. None of the participants from our nonprofit or tree advocacy groups described engaging in tree risk assessment, which I think is a really interesting finding. And when it came to tree selection, we found that storms directly or indirectly influence the way that people thought about tree selection. Participants described a variety of different drivers for what tree species they chose and planted in communities. And there were concerns about things, for example, like hardiness, the potential for limb or whole tree failure from wind or snow loading. There were also examples of, well, this tree species or may have the potential for property damage or personal injury. There were concerns about adaptation to climate change. So either directly or indirectly, we see a lot of different aspects that people are thinking about that are related to managing trees for storm events. And we also asked about perceptions about community vulnerability. So we asked, what makes communities vulnerable to storms? And responses were really diverse among the different participants, but they centered around 4 topics. Essentially, we grouped those into these 4 categories. So socio-demographic factors, neighborhood characteristics, historical legacies, and what the condition of the urban trees and canopy were. And within each of these categories too, there's some like a spectrum. So for example, if you look at social demographic factors, you see that people mention both low income areas, but also wealthy areas as vulnerable. Some of these also have spaces where there are older trees or maybe lots of trees, fewer trees or poorly maintained trees. They may consider places that are closer to downtown or areas with greater density, or areas that are maybe more in flood prone spaces as being vulnerable. So there's a really wide variety. And of course, we followed that up with, well, how might you be able to serve these vulnerable populations? And when it came to working with vulnerable populations, the different people that we spoke with shared a lot of uncertainty about what their capacity was to help build resilience and support for these places and communities. For example, one of the things that came up was, well, it can be really challenging to build trust with some communities because historically some of these communities may have experienced inequitable tree maintenance. And I have a quote here that I think illustrates that pretty well. So this person mentioned, well, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and wealthier neighborhoods maybe complained more, got things addressed more than older neighborhoods or Black neighborhoods. And also, I mean, historically, those neighborhoods, there were activists in them and they were complaining, trying to get things done, but they were ignored. So we wanted to also understand a little bit about what kinds of conflicts made managing trees for storm events challenging and what kinds of opportunities there might be for collaboration. So when it came to conflicts, we see that trees and storms created barriers for management, and they could be about unclear priorities, unclear communication, sense of having a lack of support, or other challenges. Lack of trust seem to be one of the biggest barriers to communication and collaboration with the public. And then when it came to collaboration, overall, participants seemed to agree that collaboration was key in preparing, responding, and recovering from storm events. Participants defined collaboration as having shared or common goals, having or building relationships with others, and sharing resources. They highlighted that these relationships needed to be built on trust and familiarity, and they were multi-directional, meaning that they had to happen within departments, across agencies and organizations, but also with the public. And here I have another quote that I think is a good illustration of what collaborative relationships could look like, and how knowing people personally really matters. So this person mentions, for instance, you might ask me, what's the name of the municipal forester for the city? I should be able to tell you that. I should already have a relationship with him and communication, maybe once a month. I can meet with him, or just maybe he'll give me a quick call. So communication and having that relationship is important, but we also have to be prepared to know where we could share resources. So this person really talks about how they need to be able to know who to contact and what organizations, being able to pick up the phone and know by name who it was that they needed to speak with in order for them to be able to get things done. So some of the key takeaways from this first phase. Um, like in other research, we see that urban forestry management is challenged by a lack of resources, and it tends towards more crisis-oriented decision making. Our participants really emphasize a need for more proactive planning. And like other researchers, we also saw things like credentials and experience could impact how professionals approach tree risk assessment. We also see that in our cases, collaboration is a cornerstone for managing trees for storm events. And it really needs to function across management scales, including residents. And from our participants, there are lots of different ways that taking a proactive approach might look like. For example, creating a management plan, working with risk-trained professionals, selecting the right trees for the right places in the first place, doing maintenance and structural pruning, conducting assessments, creating policies that improve conditions for tree health and survival, building those good relationships and partnerships, and setting up agreements ahead of time, ahead of storms. So as I mentioned, for this first phase of our project, we already have published a paper. And if you want to take a look at that, I have the QR code here so that you can find it. And I'm sure that we'll be able to share that with you afterwards as well. So now I want to take a look at our second phase. The reason that we have it in phases is because what we learned from that first part of the research, that first phase, really influenced and informed the way that we developed the survey for the second phase. So if you remember the first part, we did interviews, and for this second phase, we developed a survey, and that helped us learn more about perceptions of collaboration and how perceptions of risk might predict how urban forest managers may choose to collaborate. So for this second phase, one of the questions that we had was what factors impact urban forestry professionals' perspectives about collaboration when managing trees for storms? And we looked at three main factors. The first one was motivations. To assess what drivers for collaborations might be, we specifically looked at intrinsic motivations. And these might be those internal drivers for why folks are engaging in urban forestry work, and in particular, engaging with this storm-related work. And these internal drivers could be things like personal interest. It could be a sense of responsibility, for example. An example of this might be, well, I enjoy like working with trees and storm management because I enjoy protecting other people. Another example of something like this could be being motivated to participate in collaborative tree planting because you find it maybe personally enjoyable. The next factor that we looked at was engaging in professionalization. So we determined this by the years of experience that people had working with storms and trees, and also their engagement in continuing professional education. And the last factor that we looked at is something that we call job needs. And job needs really captured like the involvedness of working with managing trees for storm events. So this is, how involved people were in these different preparation, response, and recovery phases, how involved they were in planning, what kinds of actions they were taking, and how many actions and how involved they were in this part of the process. And in our survey, we defined our research areas by the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Forest Service administrative regions. And we look specifically at regions 8 and 9. So that's this top and bottom part here of the map. And we captured data from 35 states in these areas. And to share the survey, we used an online Qualtrics survey, and we asked about professional background, we asked about storm preparedness and impacts to cities, we asked about efficacy and motivations, opportunities for collaboration, demographic information. And for this particular part of phase 2, we were really focusing on questions that came out of sections 1 and 4 of the survey. So respondents' professional backgrounds and opportunities for collaboration. So overall, from our survey, about 70% of participants had a bachelor's degree or higher, and about 76% were men. On average, people were about 49 years old when they participated. And the majority of folks worked as commercial arborists, consulting arborists, or were city foresters, or municipal arborists. And more than 70% of folks said that they had 10 years or more of experience working with trees and storm events. And when it came to the way that people worked, or what their work looked like on a day-to-day basis, most participants said that they work with street trees and trees in the right-of-way. And when they were impacted by storms, they said that they were mainly challenged by interruptions to their regular work, insufficient staff, and insufficient funding. And these results are pretty similar to that first phase. And about 79% of people that took the survey agreed or strongly agreed that collaboration in preparation and response to storms was effective. So we did something called structural equation modeling to test our factors, and I'm just going to share like some of the main effects. So from our tested factors, we see that as job needs, over here, as job needs increases, perceptions of collaboration are more positive. When professionals reported working in urban forestry because they were more intrinsically motivated, then their perceptions about collaboration were more positive. And for professionals that engaged more in continuing their professional education, perceptions about collaboration was also seen as more positive. So some of the key takeaways from that. Well, overall, we could say that collaboration was viewed positively by our survey participants, but it can be kind of complicated. Our research shows that professionals believe that collaboration plays a key role in effectively managing urban trees for storms. And other studies also suggest that collaboration can help overcome limitations in resources and capacity. But there might be some more subtle things that are influencing how people perceive collaboration. Our findings show, for example, that personal and professional experiences, as well as views on how complex their work is, may also impact their perceptions of collaboration. When it comes to ways that we can improve these management capacities, we see that partnering or collaborating can help to increase those capacities, and we see that in some other literature as well. But getting to a place of partnership isn't always clear. So our research, we show that connecting over things like shared intrinsic motivation might be able to contribute to a more positive perception about collaborating. Possibly engaging in more continuing education opportunities can also foster more positive perceptions about collaboration. These insights suggest that promoting things like educational opportunities through those professional organizations um, can become launch points for collaboration, and they can help to create opportunities to dialogue with other people that are working in similar spheres and help to form those connections that can be beneficial when support is necessary for management. So these can be those sites to develop and build trust and make those connections. So now I want to talk about the last part of our second phase, so like the third part of our project. And this part really focuses on perceptions of risk and efficacy and how these impact or these perceptions impact collaboration needs. And to do that, we were looking at understanding risk and perceptions. And understanding perceptions about risk for storms can help us to understand how urban forest professionals make management decisions. Very generally, we can say that risk can be understood as an assessment of probability of harm and that magnitude of that harm. It can be very subjective, and perceptions of risk can be shaped by things like values, that can be shaped by feelings. More specifically, tree risk assessment is a systematic process that helps to evaluate a tree's potential to fail and cause harm. And when it comes to reducing risk of city trees, there's lots of different things that can be done, many different steps to help reduce that risk, starting with planting the right tree in the right place, pruning, maintaining a diverse forest, conducting inspections and assessments, developing plans, moving targets away from places where there's potential for risk, and maintaining inventory of what trees you have in your city. So for this last part of phase two, we wanted to understand a little bit better what kinds of factors influence urban forestry professionals' perceptions about the need to collaborate with outside agencies in managing trees for storms. And to help us answer that question, we assessed threat appraisals. So this is those perceived severity, frequency, and risk likelihood of storms. We assess coping appraisals, or the perception of efficacy and the perception of the cost of action. And we also assess personal and professional attributes. So these are things like years of experience, education, qualifications, and how these different factors drove the intention to collaborate with outside agencies in storm management or storm-related tree management. And again, we use the same survey, but for this part, we really focused on the questions that were from the first, second, and third sections. So respondents' professional background, storm preparedness and impacts to cities, efficacy and motivations. And we did the same analysis. So we did structural equation modeling for this one too. And to go over those results, out of our respondents, overall, 56% said that they did have a storm plan in place. And then we also had, about 17% said that one wasn't applicable, and about 9% didn't know if they had one. And when it came to collaboration needs, among the respondents, the top two areas where they said they needed more collaboration with others outside of their organization was in communicating with the non-expert public and in tree risk assessment. And we also asked how much participants, organizations, or companies spent on managing trees for storms. And we see that about 27% said that they spent less than $150,000. And 22% said that they didn't allocate a budget, and 33% didn't know. And here are some of the main effects of our structural equation model. So here we see that when threat appraisals were higher, or there were more storm types impacting, and perceptions about likelihood and severity were higher, participants said that they were more likely to require more outside collaboration. We also see that when perceptions of efficacy were higher, there were more positive effects on the view that more outside collaboration was needed. So the view that more outside collaboration was necessary. And then when more money was spent on managing, we also see that there are some positive effects on that storm-related work needing collaboration. So some key takeaways here. When it comes to perceptions of threat severity, very broadly, we see that storm effects are seen as more threatening, or when storm effects are seen as more threatening, urban forest professionals report that collaboration needs are higher. This is pretty logical. This is similar to other complex urban forestry topics. For example, we see in other cases of managing trees for infestations like emerald ash borer, very similar results. When the threat is perceived as being more extensive or higher, then that perception of needing collaboration also seems to be higher. And when it comes to collaboration needs, we see things like communicating with the public as being a very high collaboration need, along with tree-related risk assessment. This suggests that there are opportunities here for maybe some more professional development in these areas. And it could be helpful maybe for some future research to identify who those communicators are and what is necessary to support more effective communication and interaction at the different phases of storm-related management. So to summarize, urban forestry professionals seem to face really complex and varied challenges. Proactiveness is viewed overall as a shared goal among our participants. Perceptions and experiences seem to influence management practices, especially for collaboration. Collaboration is seen as strategic and necessary. Trust, communication, and motivations really matter in how professionals engage in management. And continuing education can offer opportunities to really support and enhance some of these positive associations with collaboration and really support some of those proactivity goals. I really think this is an opportunity for some of these professional associations to become those launch points for collaboration. Okay, so some overall conclusions for this. Overall, our research showed that we could fill some of these gaps in our understanding about needs and challenges of urban forestry professionals when they're managing trees for storms. And these insights can really help to develop these continuing education opportunities for these groups. It lays the groundwork for some future research, I think, including maybe some more nuanced perspectives from different tree and storm management phases. So if you're thinking about that preparation, recovery, and response, or response and recovery phases, it would be really interesting to see are there some more nuanced differences in each of those phases. There's also some opportunities in the future maybe to investigate how professionals could learn collectively from these experiences and how we can build some communities of practice to support the management for trees for storm events. So with that, I also want to thank the ISA Florida chapter. I want to thank the Garden Club of America and also AREA, in addition to, of course, the Tree Fund. I also want to thank our participants and our pilot testers for the survey and interviews. and the University of Florida Statistical Consulting Unit for helping us with some of that analysis. But mostly I want to thank all of you for coming here, participating and learning with us. Here are our references for this presentation. And if you have any questions after the presentation, or you just want more information, or you want to connect, this is our contact information. So it's for myself and also for Dr. Mysha Clarke. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Heath or Bo for questions.
Dr. Cadaval, thank you for a very good presentation. As somebody that lives on Alabama's Gulf Coasts, we are very familiar with those little things called storms, and particularly hurricanes. And so this was very good. I see Dr. Clarke has very actively been answering a lot of y'all's questions live, which is fantastic. So as y'all have any questions, please take a moment to put those in the Q&A box that we have there. If anything lingers out there, please jump in and type those up. But we do have one that's still live. And Natasha writes, in this research, did you notice any trends or changes to municipal tree codes or permit insurance rates post-storm, or know of anyone researching these trends?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, it wasn't one of the things that we asked about. But I definitely notice a lot of energy around questions similar to this, at least in Florida. So I think that it's definitely something that we need to be researching. I wonder if maybe Andrew knows, just out of experience, a little bit more about tree codes or permit issuance rates after storms. But I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately.
I could also chime in about the research on codes and ordinances. At least Michelle Johnson with the U.S. Forest Service is doing some research on that in New York. And they've looked at tree codes and ordinances mostly in the northeastern U.S. I don't think they're all published yet, but I know they've been doing some work looking at different ordinances in different cities and comparing with tree management.
I can tell you, as it relates to trees and insurance, actually, we have a study right now with a live survey. It's kind of funny that question came out. We're looking at the intersection of homeowner, trees, and insurance as something that's very closely tied to the topic y'all are looking at. And I might just throw that link in the chat box. We are looking for respondent rates. I've been floating it around Florida and all over the place, but I might throw it in there. But we are looking at that right now as a collaboration between Georgia and Alabama. So
yeah, and I did a survey with Mysha, I think you were on that one too, where we looked at Florida residents and we asked if anyone had like a problem getting insurance because of a past tree failure, is a reason not to want them, and it was pretty low. But it is something that's always in our mind, especially here in Florida. Just narrowly dodged a law where they were gonna put the blame, like the have it so if your tree fell on your neighbor's property, your neighbor could sue you, which is opening up a big can of worms right now in our state if that ever goes through. So
Dr. Cadaval, there was another question here. What drove the choices of cities you looked at in this study, and why no Western cities?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think one of the key drivers, we initially wanted to look at cities along the Atlantic hurricane belt. And then I don't quite remember why that didn't end up working out. And we tried to keep it to cities where the research team also had knowledge of who they could contact for interviews. So that also helped to shape what cities were chosen. And we tried to maintain that not on the West Coast, because the storms are a little different there. So we wanted to kind of keep a little bit more, I think, similar storm experiences. I think that's more or less why. But definitely being able to know who to contact in the different cities, the case study cities, was really important for the research team. So we kept it to cities where we had contacts as well.
Cool. And I'll throw in a question I have for you. In your interviews with your cities, did you encounter any resistance or reticence from those municipalities in conducting inventories and doing risk assessments as part of their inventories due to fear of identifying more problems than the city had budget to address? Is that something that came up at all?
That's fascinating. And I think if we would have probed a little bit more about it, maybe we would have heard something about that. Nobody mentioned that in particular. Um, but definitely during the time that we did the research, it was during COVID. So participation was a little bit difficult to get people involved. People did say that they felt, they were really feeling the effects of that lack of resources during that time in particular. So even though I think like sharing about a risk assessment because of fear that it might lead to something else wasn't something that came up. What did come up was, well, during this particular time period, we were experiencing more pressure and those lack of, resources, especially lack of staff. Um, so, so no, not really. But it doesn't mean that that's not out there.
Thank you.
Hmm.
And there was a question here, and it's a related topic, but I know we also have, Dr. Clarke and Dr. Kozer on here. But somebody asked, is there any published information that quantifies wind speeds with the level of damage incurred by urban trees? Perhaps it's too simplistic, but I'd like to know what wind speeds well-managed trees can tolerate and those wind speeds that they ultimately failure leads to. And I know that's a very complex, there's a lot of factors there, but I'll just throw that out there to the group.
Andrew, I think you have a paper that came out very recently about wind speed, right?
Yeah, so two things. Ryan Klein and I worked on a paper down with Naples, the city of Naples. In that paper, it's in Forest. I can put it up in here. We tried to plot like past studies where they had wind speeds and then like survival rates for different species, and there's no clear pattern. It's just all over the board because there's other things like tree condition that are going to be overwhelming factors in that, or soil conditions and stuff like that. So species is important, but it's not the full story, right? There's other things we have to look at. That said, species is important. Almost every study has species as a significant predictor. So I just tossed in a FEMA guide where we have like 500 species wind ratings from around the world. That's in the webinar chat if you want to look at it. So
Thank you, Andrew. We have a few more minutes. So I'll throw out some other questions. There's another one, an interesting question here from Norm. It says, do municipalities have financial responsibility to homeowners and businesses that are damaged by trees located between the street and the sidewalk? So we kind of get into a tree law question.
I don't have a good answer for this. I imagine it varies from city to city. Andrew, I don't know if you have a better answer. But I don't have this in the presentation, and I'm afraid I won't give very good information about this right now, but I do recall in our interviews, some people did talk about instances where the city did have to pay, but they mentioned that this was something that was not very common. And I honestly don't have very good information about it.
Yeah, I know as it relates a lot of times in tree law, a lot of times usually the insurance companies end up picking up once that tree fails, but unless there was prior knowledge, normally now some sort of a formal written letter, I think that's normally the way it goes, but I would agree. I think it varies by cities and state, of course,
Mhm.
and in this case, country. There was another question here by Richard said, beside track, was there any other tree risk assessment methods you have encountered being used for both pre and post storm events in the municipalities you work with?
Track was the big one that we talked about in our study. And then some of the interviewees that we spoke with also described having like their own kind of like, oh, this is how we do it. And so everyone does it this way based off of our experience and prior experience and who trained the next person. But when it came to specific qualifications, track is the one that we really heard about most in the study.
Thank you. There's another good question here by Bob that says, was there any experience with FEMA contractors after storms? I'm curious if you had a chance to interview anybody kind of related to FEMA and some of the how they interact with either preparedness or response.
So we didn't have any specific questions about that. I think in the future, that would be something that would necessitate its own study. Those interactions, like once FEMA steps in. But some people spoke anecdotally about it, and how it kind of shifted the way that things kind of procedurally happened once FEMA stepped in or became like that level of disaster, for lack of a better word. But we didn't ask specifically about that.
Thank you. I know the Forest Service, I don't know if it's still active, had the rapid tree risk assessment protocol. Eric Kuehler and some of his team, they're the Forest Service. And I don't know, I'm not sure if that's gone by the wayside or what happened to that, but that had an interaction with FEMA too.
Yeah, I think for a future study, that would be really interesting, like, and it kind of goes into that idea of like future work could really harp in on those nuances in what phase of tree related work you're doing.
And y'all, I'm scrolling through the questions. Andrew, if you see any that jump out at you on your end.
Someone mentioned, is there research on the firestorms going on in Southern California? I know that there are several folks working on that right now. So protocols for, what trees will actually survive, what level of, fire damage, and, so you can make quick assessments on what has a chance of making it through, as well as I'm sure the insurance industry, I know they're looking at whether or not, trees played a role in any of the damage we saw to homesteads. I've heard people say that, the trees were the things that were the second thing to catch on fire, the house being the first. So, there's going to be a lot of interest in that dynamic going forward. So, and I know the Forest Service was working on it leading up to this year. So, we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, it seems in the Southeast where we're worried about, wind and hurricanes, and then out west, it's, they had the Firewise program that similarly. Okay, y'all. So I see multiple questions about CEUs popping up. Just as a reminder with how Tree Fund handles CEUs on the webinar series, when you registered, you provided your name. We asked for your certification number. At the end of this webinar, we will look at the attendance records and we will send that information directly to ISA on your behalf. So there's nothing you need to do. You're not going to see the CEU code. There's no form to fill out. We're going to send that to you. ISA asks for a few weeks for that information to post on their website. Heath notes that if you would like a certificate of attendance to, as he just put it in the chat, please send him a note at education@treefund.org and he can generate one of those for you. If you have any questions, please direct those questions to Heath at that website. We got a couple minutes. Andrew, have you seen any other questions pop up as I was going through that? As always, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us here on the Tree Fund webinar series. We will be back. Remind me, Heath, I can't remember the date in July when we will have I think a panel discussion. So it's going to be a little bit of a different format that we're doing for our next Tree Fund, looking at some equity issues. We're going to have a few different researchers providing some of their perspectives. So I would encourage you all to join. I think it's going to be, anytime we try something new, it's a little uncertain, right? How is that going to work? But I think it's going to be really good to hear a variety of perspectives as it relates to trees and equity, which I think is going to be the focus of our next Tree Fund webinar series. I want to thank Dr. Cadaval, and Dr. Clarke for sharing their research, and Dr. Kozer as well for being our new trustee on the Tree Fund board. I rolled off in December, and we have some great new blood, new researchers, new direction. So thank you all for being here today, and for being part of the Tree Fund webinar series. Heath, any closing comments for you before we close today's webinar down? I think you're muted.
That does happen. Thank you all again for attending today, and be sure to follow us on our webinar page for those links as they become live. And we do have our one registration link available in October, and July 22nd panelist discussion is coming soon. So look forward to seeing you later. Thank you all.
Thanks all. Have a great
Thank you.
rest of your Tuesday. Cheers.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.